everybody. We're kind of having a reminiscing reunion here because we've I've been working with Tony for almost 10 years,
Yeah.
and and Tony just informed me that this is the first time he's ever been live on the internet. He just doesn't do this sort of thing.
Exactly. I broke into it first time ever.
All right, there's always a first. Well, cool. So, just to give a little bit of background and context where Tony comes from, we've known him for a long time. He was part of Intricity several years back, and during that time, lots of retail work that we were doing, and Tony went and ended up working for one of those retail companies. And then we finally got him back, which we were very excited about. So what we want to do is a deep dive into retail during this session. Tony has a wealth of knowledge in that space, and and Tony, is there anything I missed that there's other things that you've been involved in, of course, but any other things about retail that I missed?
No, and retail really has changed a lot over the last, just recently with everything that's going on in the world, migrating to more of an e-commerce perspective. And e-commerce has always been there, but retail has a lot of challenges. And one of the things that I always find funny when you talk about retail is you get a lot of younger generation, and they're like,
Right.
You mean there's a lot of technology and data within retail organizations? And it makes you think, because at that point, people really don't have a really good understanding of how much retail in general, all from financial systems to the marketing engine to customer information to the registers, how much data actually is flying around real time, batch, but all over the place. So that's one thing that I would say a lot of people seem to forget, that technology really is a driving factor within the retail sector.
So what are some of the biggest nuances for retail? Like, I mean, you've touched, I mean, we just were talking about an energy space just a few seconds ago. I mean, you've touched a lot of different industries. It looks like Arcadie's joined us. There he is. So you've touched a lot of industries, but obviously you've, lots in retail.
Right.
What are some of the, either the idiosyncratic things you have to deal with in retail, or what are some of the differences versus, say, other industries?
I think retail, if you really look at some of the industries out there, is very heavily dependent, and I know it's going to resound all around for all the sectors, but knowing your customer is very critical for the retail space, because you always see these things out there where it costs this much money to bring on a new customer compared to this much money to keep customers around within your industry. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of different avenues for you to go and buy groceries. There's a lot of different avenues for you to buy clothing. But when you get to stuff like internet providers and cable providers, mm-hmm, you have two or three that you could focus on. So really helping to understand your customer, market effectively to the customer, is really critical within the retail space, to keep it moving.
And Tony, you talk about like grocery, clothing, some of those, C-stores, some of those types of areas in the retail industry. I mean, a number of years ago, you had no idea really who your customer was, right?
Right.
I mean, they didn't log into a website. They didn't come in and check in when they came in through your front door. If you wouldn't mind, I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts of, maybe give us a little counsel on how things have changed over the years, and how you can get to know your customers, both from maybe a generic perspective, but also with loyalty programs and some of those things really very specifically.
Yeah. And loyalty programs have been around for a while, but getting to know your customer is still very difficult. And I'll tell you why. A lot of people, even for loyalty, if you're giving them something, it's kind of give and take. Well, if I'm going to give you my information so you could track me, quote unquote, with a loyalty program, what are you going to give me in return? Do I get points? Do I get dollars off? Do I get free product? Can I, come into your store faster and smoother and get in and get out? I do think that a lot of that is interesting, but I do believe that making it easier for the customer to update their information, get their information online, is a big difference than when you would walk into a typical brick and mortar and they'd have the survey cards there and you'd give your information right on the survey card. So having it a little bit fluid, but also giving you and the customer's choices. You'll probably notice, normally what they would do is in e-commerce, when you sign up for newsletters, it's very granular now. I could go in and I could sign up for specific newsletters. I could go in and I could sign up for, I want this weekly, monthly, quarterly, and then the detailed information around it. That's really where retail in general is looking to do that. They're also looking from little generic, but they're looking for partnerships, right? They want those loyal customers that are going to come in. And, I could give you an example is that if I walk into a store and I check out, but if I go online and I check out, the experiences for me as a customer are different, but they provide a lot of different value for each one. So
how do you consolidate those though? Like, because the physical experience is so, just disconnected from data. I guess it's not, but it seems disconnected from data. And then of course the online is like all data, everything's there.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that you start looking at, and it's when you go from a brick and mortar to an online, but the hybrid approach, getting people nowadays, and we started talking a little about technology in retail, it's amazing now what people could track on their cell phone, right? We all know that. We all carry that. And software in retail is becoming more understanding how they could leverage that data a little bit more. You got Experian data, you got Google data, you got a lot of these items now, beacons, right? You walk into a store and they know you were in the store. The critical factor there is when you want to get that information about a customer. And I'll go back to what you had, Rich, you and Jared had talked about initially is, how do I get that picture? And you're measuring customers different now. Tony Parisi may go into a store and purchase X amount of products from X different departments, and he leaves that store. Tony's worth this much to us. But then Tony, the next day, is going to go online and I purchase items that way. Being able to merge from a technology perspective and a data perspective, merging those different types of information together is critical to understand how Tony integrates or partners with the retailer. Tony may do 75% of his shopping in store. Well, does it really benefit us to target Tony online if he's only doing 25% of his shopping online? And maybe 25 of his shopping online is really spontaneous things throughout the year. There's no pattern to it. But I know Tony's coming in and purchasing X amount of products from us, and Tony likes these products. So on the back end, to get a little bit technical, bringing that data together is really critical because now you're getting a complete picture of Tony. And then I'll say the third sphere of influence there is, and like we were joking in the beginning, I'm probably a bad person to use as an example, is social media. It's Tony out there promoting your product. It's Tony out there saying good things about your product, but you want to understand that. So bringing all those areas of data together into a centralized system on how I could look at Tony as a customer and profile is critical moving forward. And it's that much more important now in this hybrid approach than it was 10 to 15 years ago.
Now, are the point of sale vendors starting to offer their solution as servicing both, like this is brick and mortar and we have a point of sale system, or is it all, data integration routines essentially? And I know it is for a classic shop, but I'm just thinking, like, if someone was going to look for a point of sale system today, are they sold that way?
They are not sold that way today. Now, I know they're moving in that direction. Because of the ability to do checking out online, right? I have not run across one that does both or does both effectively. But they are moving in that direction. A lot of the new research, the new features and functions are there. What I've encountered in my past is having the ability for the point of sale systems, bringing that data in, but then now you're working with a lot of third-party websites that are doing that. And, you've got Shipped that Target bought, right? They wanted to bring that in-house. You have a big one out there like Instacart that is doing everything from grocery to Target to PetSmart. They're bringing all that data around. The idea is, and it goes to what you were saying, Jared, is bringing that third-party data in and merging it within the point of sale system data that you're already collecting. That's critical and going to be very important as you start into that marketing. How am I marketing to this person? How am I marketing to that person?
And Instacart itself, like that's a third party pushing to you purchases, right, of products that you have in inventory.
Correct.
And so when they send you that, is there validation you have to do against that? Because I mean,
yeah, I was going to say
dollars there.
Right. And it's how detailed from a dollars perspective you're coming into. As everybody knows, when you go online, a product can cost +% more when you buy it online because it takes into account those items. From a financial perspective, you have to start asking yourself, and you do with this is, when do you start realizing revenue? If I go into the store and I pay, I have realized revenue on that date. If I go online and buy product, but my product, I put it in there to be shipped in 3 weeks, you have to be able to do the math from a financial perspective is, I am not going to see that revenue for 3 weeks. So even though the order is in on this date, my revenue recognition isn't until the date that it's actually delivered or picked up. And if you get into the details around the financials and the sales aspects of, how much did you sell today compared to what you're forecasted at selling, that's important data to take a look at. And, different companies out there, I've been part of a company that will use it more from revenue recognition day, but I've also worked with companies in the past with a sale is a sale is a sale, no matter if I collect the money today or 3 weeks from now. But bringing that data in is very important from the third parties, because you do a lot of, I'll say, trusting, but as Arcadie's online, I'll say trust but verify. You have to run those validation algorithms and understand what you're looking for, because there are problems, there are challenges as it pertains to how good is that data, and is there a plus or minus on what you're measuring against before you look at it.
Are there scenarios where you're underpaid by or is it under or over at times?
Sometimes you're overcharged. You look at that, and you have to look at your invoices and go, I'm getting charged for X, but is X really what I'm doing? And those are a lot of the automation techniques that you could do on the back end within various systems. It's algorithms and business rules, right? And you code those business rules. And we've had a lot of experience in the past where you have these monthly or quarterly reports that are run automated, and then your financial group would take a look at, is it up, is it down, where does it fall? So it's very important, right? Data's critical in those aspects as more of a validation method moving forward.
Yeah, we're just 14 minutes into this, and you could pick any one of the topics that you've talked about right now and spend more than a day discussing just that one little topic. You go from a basket when someone purchases, and you want to be able to do market basket analysis to understand what does a typical basket look like. All of you have heard stories about, you place beer where the diapers are, you place diapers where the beer is, because that's typically late at night when people are going in and buying, that's what they're buying. The baskets are important, and that analysis is, you have to be able to cover it, whether it's brick and mortar or it's online. You're looking to see what are people bundling together. And Tony, perhaps talk about the one thing that obviously is critical to all of this, and that is good reference data. So retail probably is the best place for that, having the product master, their standards in place. It's not like in some other industries. Talk a little bit about how important that is, and sort of because it sounds like that begins the journey. You got to know what your products are, so that you understand what your customers are buying.
Yes, and product master is critical. If you look at master data management in general within the area as it pertains to retail, product / item and customer are your two most important master data areas to take control of. And product's very interesting because it's changing all the time. You may have various colors of a shirt. You may have various sizes of a shirt or a product like yogurt. You have different varieties, different colors. But mastering that data is important because you want to get down to those items. And the reason why you want to get down to the item level and that granular level is as you're mastering these products, it's what you sell online, what you sell in store. But it also helps, and I'm going to wrap it all the way back to your supply chain. Supply chain within this area that we've been living in for the last 2 years is critical, as everyone has heard about the supply chain issues across retail in general. Mastering that and understanding where those products are and what the details of those products are don't only help what we're moving, and when I say it, moving a product from A to B to C, but how to get it to the shelf, or how do I get it to my online area. That's critical to really understand how you're managing that. And if I'm talking about a pair of glasses, this pair of glasses right here can be blue, it could be green, it could be one bifocal compared to the next. That's critical as you're starting to ship these products to your customers.
Now, is all that data all of that data is coming from the vendors, right? It's not you guys creating it as a retailer, but it's the vendor providing it to you, right?
It's a little bit of both.
Okay. Is there an agreed sort of format to this? Because I mean, let me just give you an anecdotal. Literally, I was with my son. We went into there's a place here in Texas called Academy Sports, and it's just like it's a sports. It's like a Dick's Sporting Goods type place. And I walked in, I'm like, man, this would be a nightmare of just so many products and just the little descriptions and just to try and manage all of that.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how that happens. Like what's some of that, that mess?
Well, a percentage does come from your vendors who manufacture the products, but then you're putting your description on there.
Does it come in as like an Excel sheet, as a XML? Is it all over the map?
All over the map, right? They do try to put some structure around it. They have, and there's groups that are trying to do this, but those groups do a good job of it. But then I will flip it, and it's more of what the companies are. And what is their business process to take that data and the willingness to understand someone else? I mean, we've all heard this. Someone else is doing this and getting paid to do this for a reason. Yeah. People are buying into it and looking at it, but then you want to make it your own, right? Yep. And that's where a lot of the challenges are. Is it's around business process and around change management to really have a good understanding of, they're giving us this data. Let's take that data, leverage it the way that it's leveraged, and then expose that. And there are things you want to add to it. And more of these committees that are out there that put this information together and data together, it's becoming more and more relevant that they need more adaptation of that, more input. And you do have you do have software companies out there that are doing that from a master data perspective and working for them. You have Semarchy, you have Stebo, you have a lot of the small niche players, larger one, Informatica, that work directly with these other agencies to bring data in and hopefully supplement what their products and tools do, But I will tell you, a lot of that is managed not through just the master data tools themselves, but from an analytical perspective. How's that data getting into your data warehouses? How's it getting into your applications? I'm sure you guys, right? I'm sure you guys have seen it. I could go online and look at a description of a shirt, and it says A, B, C, D. I then go into the store looking at the same shirt, and I only see A and B. Right? That's the disconnect. All the data is there, but now it's taking that data from these agencies and then making sure your applications that's using it, maybe your website, your mobile device, is it using the right information and the same information across the board?
Right.
Syncing that data up from a product master perspective is very challenging. And that's why you'll see, I could look online, I could look on my mobile device, I could go in store, and I may see 3 different things.
Right.
And Tony, from a reporting perspective, if we're looking at data warehousing and like some of the stuff Katie was talking about, market basket, we want to do some market basket analysis, right? We want to run some promotions, and so we want to look at running some promotions on some items where we've got a large, profit margin, but ones that will drive people to purchasing other products also. And let's say that we're a grocery store and we're selling a soda, right? That one soda, you have it in a can, you have it in a 20-ounce bottle,
right.
You have it in a 2-liter bottle, you have the holiday version, you have the NFL
right.
version, and they're all different UPCs, right? They're all different UPCs, but that's part of the managing of that catalog, right? Because we need to know and understand, we probably don't really care that somebody bought the Snickers bar with the holiday version of the can of the soda. We're probably more interested in, just at the level of the soda. So, and all of those things, you talk about, clothing too. I mean, those are constantly changing. Every year you're coming up with new, the sporting goods store, Adidas, Nike, Puma, they're Under Armour. This is last year's model of this. So talk a little bit about that, the importance of that, Tony, from a data warehousing, analytics perspective, from a reporting.
And you bring up a good point there, Rich, which is, we've talked a lot about the data warehousing and the data, but the overarching terminology here that people get scared of is you have the master data, but there's got to be some sort of data governance. And a lot of people think and talk about data governance that it's easy to implement. People need to realize data governance is 90% process and 10% technology. And understanding, Rich, the way you were saying how you want to report on it, you would have all that granular level of data. But the business has to ask itself is, what's the value of being able to report on that data? Because if you look at, you talked about the Snicker bar, I could tell you based on the data that's coming in from these other agencies, I could tell you based on the UPC what you want to look for or what you'd want to query for to get that information. Now you may have you may have candy, you may have chocolate bars, you may have Snickers, and then you'll have the different variations of the Snickers bar. Understanding that data and getting that data categorized or in a catalog, like you're saying, and roughed out within the data warehouse allows you to use various BI tools to do that sort of reporting on it. And, we've all been in the industry a long time. We never want to make it simpler than it is. But as long as you have the data and you understand how it needs to be categorized and you have your appropriate checkboxes in the back and your business rules, you can look at that data. I want to take your question, one step further up, which is, what is important to look at? What does the business want to look at? But what's the governance for that data? We talked a little about the master data for product. There's a whole governance process that goes around that, which is what attributes are important for us to report on. And those attributes, you could have 1,000 different attributes for a product. Which ones are critical, which ones are not? And, you could land all that data within in a raw area of your technology, but then what attributes really need to be carried through, normalized, have the right dimensions and facts within the data warehouse. So now you're looking at that, and that'll bring me back to where data science has come into play within the retail market space as to help really understand, like you're saying, Rich, you may only be, if I'm looking at Rich's history, you may only buy soda that's in a can. So if I'm marketing to you based on what that data is, I don't want to market a 2-liter bottle to you. You may be like, well, do you not know me? Do you not understand my buying patterns? So using that data and the data governance on how that's all defined helps drive what's you bring into your data warehouse, but then how do you actually enable the business to consume that data to make business decisions?
So
Very
out
critical.
of the groups inside of retail, you got your merchants, you've got the marketing teams. There's a whole bunch of teams. Who are the most data hungry, would you say, is like number one on the list?
Okay, so great question, because I'm like, they're all data hungry.
Yeah.
Right. I
Well,
think
where does who eats the money? Like,
right?
man, you guys are querying way tons here.
Yeah, and this may surprise some people. In the last 5 years, marketing is starving for data. Marketing really holds a lot. If you look at a lot of companies out there now, marketing holds the purse strings to a lot of internal money to look at that, because they're the ones who want to look at what's the customer doing. They're the ones who are marketing out there on the social sites.
Well, yeah,
or websites.
When you said to Rich, you may only like soda in a can, I thought, wow, that's a very bespoke ad. But are they getting down that low, like where
Yes.
it's
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're getting that low for multi reasons, because
I like my tumbler.
Yeah.
they want to make sure that they're target marketing, and it's not just for and I'll step away. It's not just for retail either. We were talking about the energy companies.
Yeah.
Those sorts of companies are starting to look at, and I'm sorry, the sun is coming in.
It's all right.
All these companies are starting to target market more, because marketing is not cheap.
Yeah.
Right. So if I spend X amount of dollars on marketing, what am I really bringing back into the company? How am I pushing that needle that it needs to get pushed? I started to talk to you a little about marketing as the driving factor, and I'd say they're the data starving ones. And I don't know if everyone would agree or not, but I'm telling you, within now, and I lump it under supply chain, transportation, logistics. How are you transporting data across the country now? You're right. Are you getting it there in a timely manner? That is critical for retail companies now, is just understanding the supply chain based on labor, based on transportation, based on getting product to the shelves. Those are really data-rich environments that you could track, and you could really decipher and perform some great data analysis on, to understand where you can make do efficiencies, create new opportunities moving forward. So supply chain, and I know people define supply chain as one area. When I talk supply chain, I'm talking about the transportation wrapped in there too, because I think that's very critical when you look at supply chain in general.
Well,
Tony is referring to the last mile of delivery. So if you think about sort of where success is for retail, retail, and this is something that we should definitely talk about, which is what impact has Amazon had on this. But if you think about sort of the last mile of delivery, how important that is. You clearly see services, so we touched on Instacart, but you see services that will Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber Eats and those kinds of services. Those are all examples of that last mile delivery. That's the most difficult part. The stuff that Tony's also alluding to is you not only do you have to have a proper supply chain, but you have to figure out, when do you deliver from a warehouse, a central warehouse location? When do you have a vendor deliver product to you? All of those variables have to be figured out.
Is that something negotiated, or like does each product kind of have its own negotiation path, and then the deliveries? So are you sort of optimizing for whatever the best cost is? Is that what the approach is?
Yes, and I'll talk, Arcady, and I know you'll have some insight into this too. Is you are, because there's a lot of what if analysis that has to take place, which is if I'm going to use Target as an example. Target bought Shipped, right? Well, they bought it because they wanted to be able to control what they delivered, how they delivered, and they have their own fleet moving forward. You look at Amazon, and I think I was just reading an article or something the other day, which is Amazon is going to have delivery almost that is going to be beyond what FedEx and UPS are currently doing today, based on how they're doing that, right? And there's a lot of things that are taken into account when you look at that, but each one is negotiated differently. And you got to, I'll take it back to data. You have the data and historically what it costs to deliver items. If you're using a vendor, if you're doing it yourself, there's some places where it's more economical to do it yourself compared to sending it to somebody. And that's where data helps, because you could run these what if analysis, data science arenas and go, if I did it this way, this is what my gross profit could be. If I did it this way, this is what my gross profit could be, right? But you need data and the architecture to be able to support that, to make those decisions.
You gotta account for a lot of things, because you've got like labor costs, storage, warehousing costs. There's a lot in there.
Yeah. So as an example, labor cost. So what's interesting is you walk into a typical large grocer today, or even a box store. Who's putting the items on the shelf? We always hear about shelf space, and you want to be certain location on the shelf, not at the very bottom. You want to be sort of eye level. But the reality is, a lot of times those vendors, in order to get some of that shelf space, will come in and be the ones that put the items on the shelf for you. And so that's, again, that's part of your cost mix, to figure out which way is it more advantageous for you to do it? What's the value?
And I want to, before we leave that topic, because I think that's important as we wrap around the customer discussion we were having. And like I said, you just read more and more about some of these things that are going on, and it's all about keeping the customer. You look at an article I read about Target and Walmart. They're not increasing prices during the inflation, which is going to hit, it hits their bottom line, which means it hits the stock, and you have your board and all that go, oh my God, we're losing, going to lose it to the bottom line. But Target and Walmart said they want to keep the customer. And there are things you have to invest in to keep the customer for the long term. And it shows loyalty. So we've used the word loyalty before. And, if you go to Walmart right now or Target, they're saying they're not doing this. It hits their stock, but the customer is more important to them, which is critical, because the customer is the one who's going to be loyal to you as you go further and further down.
I suppose it drives out any competition as well. Whoever has the funds to kill.
Essentially, that's your customer acquisition cost. If you're giving up margin, and these are organizations that operate on a very thin margin to begin with, and so if you're giving up that margin to keep the customer. To Tony's point, loyalty is a two-way street. When we talked about loyalty program, Tony, you touched on the fact that what's in it for the customer? What's the value of to the customer? And I think, again, loyalty programs are those that are successful, do something that help the customer track their purchases and be able to make easier returns and be able to make easier reorders. There's a number of things that happen as a result of it.
I mean, I'm a pretty rebellious customer, I think, because I never sign up for any of these programs. I think probably the one exception is Costco, because they, you
need a card.
So much. Yeah, you have to do that to get in. I mean, there's got to be a lot of that. There's got to be a lot of people out there that aren't willing to sign up for, like, how do you track that? Like, how do you track people that are just sort of, hey, I'm walking in, you have no idea who I am, Right. You're just going to start browsing the store, and you might be a regular shopper. Like, you might be going there, but you're just not going to participate in the program. Like, are they like phantom accounts,
Yeah, they're phantom accounts. I mean, you could tell who these individuals are to a certain extent, but it is hard because it's that give and take mentality. And you know what it takes there too, Jared? And I mean, we talked a lot about data governance. We've talked about all the data.
Yeah.
Really, data quality is important, right? Because like you just said, I have a group of people who just don't want to give me their information, right? But I got a group of people, which is larger than you would expect, are willing to give their information.
Yeah.
And the quality of that data, and you talk about master data, has to be managed through the governance aspect, because what you don't want to do is misinterpret or mismarket to an individual who is open and willing to giving you their data to then abusing that data.
Yeah, of course.
Because you will not get that customer to turn around and update their information or give it back. And, you know, that's one of the things I'll say too, which is critical in what we're doing a lot with e-commerce and cloud, is security. You know, we've all heard about the data breaches, and retail companies, they're prime targets for a lot of these data breaches, and a lot of people get worried about that. So security is critical when you look at that piece of it too.
Now, is there a way, because, you know, like if I'm walking in, there's beacons there that are seeing that I walked in, they're seeing where I'm going. Is there a way to sort of, I'm going to use the word cache, but is there a way to cache up the activity of that person that has a, distinct ID from the beacon over time as they come in and out? And then maybe after a year of shopping, I say, hey, I'm going to sign up. Right.
Yep.
Is there a way to say this beacon information that we've been caching up for the last year actually is this person's ID?
Yes. There are rules that you could do with that. That's the same thing as, the old adage is, just because I don't have a loyalty program, when I check out at a register in any store with a credit card, and guess what? If I use if that same credit card comes in 5, 6, 7 times,
tie it in.
I could tie my transactions back to that credit card so that when you do it, you could tie all that information together. And that's critical, right? Because that's important. But from a beacon perspective, as you gather and track that information, it's even different today. And when I say that is, back when everything was not cloud related, you always had storage challenges. You always had, capacity challenges. What do I really want to store? Do I want to store all this arduous data that no one's giving it to me? That changes now, where when you have cloud storage and you're in the cloud, that's pennies on the dollar as you're storing these terabytes and terabytes of data, which then allows you to tie things together and merge information together. Because I will tell you, you go on site and you get the cookies and everything is, listen, we've all been there at one day where we've been talking about something, and then all of a sudden we go online and go into our Google account, and I'm getting an advertisement of what I just talked about 15, 20 minutes ago.
I really hate that.
Jared is very familiar with that.
I hate that.
That's not happy chance. They are collecting the data on all of us, and that's what the cloud and this new technology and everything is allowing us to do, is really get at that granular level, but really start understanding how we could use it moving forward. So I
can't tell you how much I hate it when that happens, though.
It's convenience, Jared. It's all to make your life easier.
No, it just, I don't know why, but that creeps me out. It's when it gets creepy that it feels, that I don't like it.
Well, no, you're looking at it, but
But there's a flip.
Go ahead, Katie. No, go ahead.
There's a flip side to this. So a lot of retailers are looking at data clean rooms. A lot of marketing organizations are looking at data clean rooms. This is a concept that is critically important in retail because a lot of it is de-identified data. Obviously, we've got compliance reasons to do this, but it's also for data safety. Whatever barriers you have to protect the data, if you de-identify it, you now have a rich set of data. You understand, demographics, you understand location, you understand baskets, but it doesn't say that it's Tony, it doesn't say that it's Jared, and so you're still able to get the analytics done.
Yeah. I think what it is it's the black box that doesn't tell any humans who I am, but knows who I am. That's
right.
the part that
Yep.
just is creepy.
But there's also something going on right now, specifically in that world. If you look at what Apple has recently done, if you look at what's happening
that's
within
true. That's
Google, so some of those identifiable cookies and the way that whole ecosystem has worked is changing. So and those changes are here now. I mean, this is not something that
it's just
that
got
is
implemented
years away.
Right.
Right.
I mean, what is the workaround to that? Because it doesn't sound like there is one. I mean,
well, so all of you, and again, we're sort of getting into sort of NSA type discussions here, but your IP address is unique. Even if you have a dynamic IP, your IP address is unique. So there are other ways of sort of doing identification. In a brick and mortar situation, it certainly is much easier. I do think we should touch a little bit on the fact that retail was fairly stagnant up until the disruptor in the marketplace. And I would say the first wave of disruption was, Walmart, and certainly Amazon has had a tremendous impact. You just talked about sort of last mile delivery. Amazon is opening warehouse locations, and with the purchase of Whole Foods, and now opening up Amazon, I forget what they call it, Amazon Fresh. So supermarkets, modern supermarkets, where you'll be able to walk in. It's a cashless, it's a cash register less impact. You check out without having to go through a register. That's also having an impact and making data even more important.
And you're right, Arcady, because those kinds of things that are happening, it goes, and I will swing it back to the supply chain aspect of it is, they have more warehouse distribution centers. That's the critical part. I mean, if you walk into a Whole Foods right now, what do they have in there? Return your Amazon purchases here. They want to increase that footprint, and that's all data driven, right? That's what people are
got lockers
there right now
to pick up your Amazon purchases. So that side of it as well.
I was just going to say, Jared and Rich and Arcady, is when you look at what Amazon has done, in my opinion, is people are specifically one-way animals, which is people still like to go in and touch and feel things. I don't care if it's food. I don't care if it's clothing. I mean, I could give you an example of people go, well, what's the challenge? Well, if I need something today, I'm not ordering it online, right? If I need something today, I got to be able to go in there. I also think that there's a process around cross-selling and upselling that you don't get, and I have not seen. I mean, Amazon does a good job of throwing a lot. Well, if you buy this, you'll like this, you'll like this, you'll like this, in your face. But there's nothing like, and I hate to say it because they're giants that are dying, but if I go into a mall, I'm more likely to spend X amount more dollars than if I just went online and bought my button-down shirt and tie that I needed. And I think that's a little bit more within the food retail area that you get that too, which is I could go in there with my basket and I'm going to spend $100. And I'll be honest with you, is you look at a lot of these agencies out there. I spend the same amount of money every month with my, we belong to Chewy. I spend the same amount of money every month with Chewy. If I'm out at a Petco or there's a Petco in the area, I know Chewy offers the same thing, but I'm going to buy it from the Petco because it's there. I could see it. I walk in and I take it. I think that's something that retail in general is probably going to be looking at moving forward is how are better ways, and I know this is hypothetical, but what are better ways to cross-sell and upsell to get a bigger share of my wallet than what I'm doing today? Because online, you go on with a specific purpose. I want this.
Yeah. And that is absolutely true. Like you definitely
you're not walking the aisles like you do at Costco. You're not.
And it seems to be, it seems to be also more when you're going online, at least for me, when I go in, it's just because something popped in my head, like, oh, I need to get that, so I'll go and grab it. And it's one thing, like I'll order one item. Whereas you're right, like I would grocery for sure. Like I it's funny actually, some of the millennials around me, they're into the shop online and pick it up at the store.
Yeah.
I can't get myself to do that. I've tried it and I'm just like, why? Like I want to see the product I'm about to get. Like
I don't want somebody else picking out my avocado.
That's exactly what my point is, right? It's somebody that represents my interest from a financial perspective, wants to get my money, but I have to consume the product, So.
But as a company that helps people get information and make better decisions, I can tell you that at least a significant percentage of shopping was done where you shopped online and picked up, mostly because of COVID. And so people, instead of going into the stores, they would drive up, and you could see this movement based on the markings on in the parking lots. So you get into a parking lot and you say pick up location, and whether it's Home Depot or whether it's Whole Foods or any of the other retailers, Bed Bath and Beyond and Gap, all of them have opportunity where you would shop online and pick up in the parking lot because you just open your trunk.
I'm wondering what the loss of additional revenue there is when you have that happen. You know what I mean? Like, is that a known number?
It could be a derived number, right? Because if you're shopping someplace for so long, they have your historical data.
Yeah.
I could see that I was trending this, I'm trending at a specific level, but
it goes way down.
Yeah, and Jared, you bring up a good point there, because it is different, which is with online data and brick and mortar data and all the historical data you have, businesses in the retail area have to ask different questions of their data that they never had to ask before. And the question you're asking right now is a critical one, is, as Tony was my customer, he spent X amount of dollars.
Yeah.
Over the last year, Tony's spend in his wallet has gone down. Why? Right?
Yeah.
So we'll talk on the data side, but I'll tell you from a retail perspective, the questions that you're asking of your data are completely different than what you were asking of your data 5 to 10 years ago. Completely different.
And, Tony, we talk about, take a business, retail business. There's so many, we've got marketing, we've got purchasing, we've got operations, we've got, all of these different areas. And then we've got the technology side that owns the data estate, right? That manages that creates these pipelines. Talk to us a little bit about, the responsibility of that technology team to coach and mentor the other parts of the business, and help them to really understand how to use that data estate.
It is a transformation, quote unquote, and that's what it is a transformation of how you want to utilize your data and what that data estate looks like. We talked very briefly about maybe sources of data or sales data come in a specific way, right? Now your data pipelines, I'm going out and grabbing data from a lot of third-party vendors to make that happen, which is completely different because everything was on-prem before, everything was centralized. But understanding, and I will say, we talked a little about the data sharing in the beginning. Data sharing is becoming it's becoming the norm now, where companies want to pay companies for data because it's so critical. So you'll see a lot, we won't sell your data, we won't do this, or if you opt in, your data could be sold. And it's critical what you're asking, Rich, is because you have all this data, but creating the right data estate and the data pipeline to ingest that data, but then being able to utilize that data from social media, from your external delivery partners, from your producers, all this information really needs to be brought into your data estate and platform. And some of the information that is out there is critical in making decisions. But then educating your business partners on how to leverage that data, right? I mean, we all know that, you know, we've talked a lot about data. We haven't talked a lot about the consumption of that data and the old BI paradigm, which is I have static reports that are delivered to me. I have dynamic reports, but now I have these things that I could go out there based on my data estate to perform some analytics. I could do some data querying. There's other tools now that I could use to leverage that data. The idea is getting your business units and working with them and showing them the new way of using data or the new way of asking questions of data is critical. But your data estate and the data ingestion, it has to be easy, right? To the business. Now, for us that do the work on the back end and tie it all together, I will never say that's easy. But for our end users, that has to be easy for them to consume the data because they will run away from it. And I think, Rich, you and Jared had asked a good question, which is in the beginning, you know, how much we talked about retailers and people going, really, there's data there? There is so much data that is untapped. And I know everyone's heard this expression is, how do you start monetizing your data for the company? Because the data can be used to make the right decisions or some sort of decision to leverage that data more effectively. And we may think about it one way. We may think supply chain data is only going to be used by the supply chain group.
Right.
That is such a bad way of thinking about data. Data is universal. That shipment, that supply chain data can be added and it could be looked at and merged throughout the entire corporation on how they leverage that to make decisions. We do work, there's been work that was done in the past with a company that goes around and collects hazardous wastes. Can you imagine what kind of data that brings to the table? Can you resell it? How do you store it? How do you dump it? Those are all critical things that they never thought of before. And let's also throw in there that there's government now, the EPA. You know, if I want to do a new site, how do I look at that data? How do I bring that data in? So from a retail perspective, I still believe we are still scratching the surface as to how to leverage that data.
So this may have been the answer to this question that I had, which is, what are some of the most common mistakes that retailers are making right now, as it relates to data? Is it just not collecting, or, you know, is there other things that you think are kind of the highest?
Collecting, I think is easy. I think collecting has been taking, you know, every all the way back to IRI, information resource, all right? Collecting data is always there. I think the biggest problem with data within retail is the business hasn't understood how to leverage that data effectively yet. They need help with understanding what they could really get from their data. I also feel that as you look at a lot of areas that are out there, retail are legacy giants. There's a lot of legacy systems that are in retail. And yes, getting data out of legacy systems is very difficult. But retail in general, you have to start putting together the roadmaps and the strategies to get out of the legacy systems. And, you know, I know everyone goes, well, we have these appliances, we have these green screens. It takes X amount of dollars to get it over into a new architecture. You can't focus on that. What you have to focus on by moving to this new architecture and technology, how is that enabling my business partners? And I think that's the biggest gap that lives today, is the business has been doing ways in retail the same decade after decade after decade. Understanding how to start leveraging the data in a way that's going to be beneficial and value add is a huge chasm that exists today.
It's almost like imagining what's possible and maybe not knowing what's possible. And so you're always managing to cost reduction or cost avoidance in every case.
I think just look at the question, Jerry, that you asked. How does, or perhaps it was Rich that asked the question, you know, sort of what's the responsibility of IT to educate the business? I think it's a tough road sometimes, because IT is expected to be on the order taker side. You know, IT is there to support the capabilities that the business tells it needs. Right. And so the age of data science is changing some of that. But again, it's the edge cases today. It's not the norm. So the big question ultimately is, how do you partner with the business so that this is the world of the possible, to your point, is not something that's esoteric and is just limited to one or two people in the data science group.
Right.
Marketing certainly is one area. I think the other places, but it's across the business. Again, retail is a complex beast. Restocking items, knowing, as Rich said, from season to season, you've got changes. How do you know what you need to deliver? From planning, it starts with the PLM system, and you're doing your SKUs and planning your items. If you're in the, if you're doing clothing, I mean, we've got a number of customers that are in that space. Data. So everybody talks about data.
Katie, before you leave there and I think that's another critical thing you've seen over the course is people think that you can within retail the SKU count. The SKU count is tremendous right now within the grocery arena, within the garment industry.
Yeah,
you could see a lot of them are using data to understand which SKUs to drop. Right? So you're using data to make the right business decision when in the past, excuse me, you didn't have that information at your fingertips. Now, if you have up to date, as Rich would say, the data platforms and the data estate, I could go in there and check SKUs and go, out of these 1,000 SKUs, these X amount are my laggards. I'm just going to get rid of them. Makes all the financial sense in the world. Data empowers the merchants within these industries to make those decisions that they didn't have before.
And that's true for all industries. I mean, you obviously know the example that I'm about to bring up, but we met with an executive leadership team, and one of their goals was simplifying complexity. Sort of played right into the Intricity logo.
Great goal.
Yeah.
And one of the key things they were targeting is, they had 114 locations, 52 different ERPs across those locations, and inventory on shelf as an asset, depreciating asset, and knowing which assets to take off shelf and either fire sale or even get rid of, because you're paying for that real estate. You're paying for that item to sit on the shelf and not be utilized.
Well, we have reached a full hour, and Tony, I think we could go, we could keep going like on each one of these topics, but it was really awesome to dive into retail with you, and we hope to have Tony on more of these as we add more guests through the time on data, because it's great to have the contribution. Rich,
Super.
also,
you're a
and
shark
Katie.
now, Tony.
Yeah,
I'm a
you're
shark.
a shark. You're officially onboarded.
I'm a minnow.
So, gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and thank you everybody for chiming in. We'll catch you all later.
Have a nice